And we're back. We're there for the first time for everybody else. I am so sorry. So we're going to start this over and say welcome to the Bordertown Strange podcast. I'm Pam,
And I'm Jess.
And I'm Mark.
and we are a group of researchers and paranormal investigators who love nothing more than to delve into our archives to share our knowledge. Every other Wednesday, we are bringing to you a predetermined topic involving weird and fantastical things that have caught our attention. And on tonight's show, we are discussing cursed objects with things like cursed jewelry, furniture, artwork, and more. So remember to like, subscribe, and share. And for those of you that are listening to us, we highly encourage you to watch the show on YouTube or Facebook, both at Bordertown Strange, for the visuals that we'll bring along with the stories. So, Jess, why don't you get us going again?
All righty. First, our apologize. We're starting a little late. We had some glitches, but
That
we
would
got
be
it all
Pam.
figured out.
That needs to be my new name, Glitch.
At
Learning
least it wasn't the
curve.
Matrix.
True.
So, to get this rolling, first of all, happy Valentine's Day to everyone. If you're watching us live, and it must be because you don't have a date, so we'll be your dates tonight. Aw, thank you, Mark. Sending hearts out to everybody. A little disclaimer before we start on the cursed objects. This topic, as with any topic that we're going to do, we're going to present you the stories. We're going to present you the research that we've put in behind it. We are not saying that these stories are true, and we're also not saying that they're false. It's completely up to you to make that decision on your own. So with that said, we're going to get rolling, and we're starting out tonight with cursed jewels. And I'm going to start out with one not everybody's heard of, but it's quite cursed from what I've seen in my research. Lots of bad things have happened. So it's called the Delhi Purple Sapphire. Or the Gem of Sorrow, because it's got to have a good creepy name. You can go and see this gem. It's at the Natural History Museum in London.
Yes.
It was originally stolen from the temple of Indra, Kanpur in India. Indra, excuse me, is the Hindu god of war and weather. Just so you know, it was stolen in 1857 during the occupation, and it was stolen by a Colonel W. Ferris. He was a Bengal cavalryman, walked into the temple and made off with the sapphire. Now, it's not actually a sapphire; it's an amethyst. Just so you know,
It's a very
and the
dark
setting that
amethyst.
yeah, the setting that you're seeing it in right now was not there originally, and there's a story behind the setting that you're seeing that is actually kind of creepy in itself. So, Colonel Ferris takes this home back to his family house in Europe, or in the UK, I should say. And he and his family started having severe health problems. They started having money issues. And every member of his family suffered an illness in that same year, just one by one. Not all the same one. I couldn't find the listings of what the illnesses were, however. So he passed not that long after. After his death, the gem was passed on to his son, who also suffered through all the same health and money and family issues that he had. Now, in 1890, it passed to Edward Heron Allen, who was a polymath writer and scientist. And he was a skeptic of the curse until he and his family began to suffer the exact same fates of all the previous owners. Now, I'm going to give this is going to be fun for Mark and Pam and anybody who's relatively interested in this kind of quirky, mysterious stuff. Edward Heron Allen was the one that originally translated the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Oh.
Which is related to the Somerton Man mystery,
Oh, yeah.
which we might have to do a story on some other time. If you don't know what that is, just a little, he was a body that was found on a beach in Australia with all these really weird clues stuffed into his clothing. They didn't know his name. They didn't know how he got there. He had luggage from one place and books from another, and he had a ripped piece of the rubaiyat, I believe, sewn into his shirt. Just a little weird off the side. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Sometimes the side stories are almost as fascinating as the main story.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I even, just for the funsies of it, I have an original copy of the rubaiyat.
Ooh,
Oh, wow.
cool.
Right? So we might have to do a little story on that sometime.
Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah. So Mr. Heron Allen, right, who is a skeptic, suddenly goes through all of the same things that the previous ones had. Illnesses in the family, misfortunes, money problems. And he ultimately decides that it's going to be up to him to reverse the curse, right? So he opted to have the gym set in a ring, the shape of a snake, decorated with zodiac signs with 2 pendants on either side. And you're going to see it right up here on the picture. One has 2 scarab beetles and one with a T engraved in silver. And this was supposed to like work a spell and take the curse away from the stone, but it had to stay within this setting. Why? I don't know. I don't think it worked, though. I don't think it worked. The gym did seem to sleep for a short while, although Heron Allen claimed the ghost of a Hindu yogi who was searching for the gym was hunting him down in his dreams. So he was dreaming every night that this Indian yogi was just hunting him down, asking for his stone back. Yeah, he did try to kind of make a containment field around it, Enzo. Something to that effect.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So he's having all these strange dreams. And in 1902, Heron Allen lent the gym to a friend. Why he would do this, I have no idea. Who was immediately struck down by illness and misfortune also. Heron Allen finally decided to get rid of the gym by tossing it into the Regent's Canal in London. However, 3 months later, the canal was dredged and the ring was found, and the ring was brought to a local jeweler just near the canal who actually recognized the gem and returned it to Heron Allen.
Oh, good grief. I mean, that's beyond cursed. At that point,
Yeah.
is it possessed and coming back? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Now
crazy.
the stone is like what, like that, maybe the size of a quarter, I would guess.
That's a
So
pretty
the
good sized stone.
settings,
It
it
is.
is. But if you think about it, was thrown into a canal and dredged.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how hard it was to find that one little? I would think that it would have slipped down into the silt.
Yes.
And probably not been seen again.
And let alone for it to
So
be actually recognized and to be returned.
exactly. So I'm thinking the curse is working here. So he holds on to it for a little bit longer. And then he yeah. And then he lent it out again.
Are you sure these people were his friends and not his frenemies?
Right?
You know, it remains to be questioned there. So this time he lent it out. He says it's a friend. He lent it out to this friend who was a prominent singer, actually. But the night that she went to go open her show, she wore it and completely lost her voice, and so had to cancel.
Wow.
Yeah. So she gives it back to Heron Allen. And he decides, because his wife has just had their first baby, they had a newborn daughter. He decided that it was really unsafe to keep the stone around his family. So he packed it. And this is where he really goes to town. He's decided he needs to really keep this thing away. So he packed it in 7 boxes So he put it in a box, and then that box went in a box, and that box went in a box, and so on to 7 boxes. And in each box, he placed a special charm that would seal that box. So each one of those boxes had a charm in it too. And then he put it in a bank safe far away from him with a letter of warning telling the entire history of the stone and that no one was to open the 7 boxes until 33 years after his death. Why 33 years? I have no idea. I tried to look into it because I thought maybe he was a Mason or something like that. I was trying to look for a symbolic 33.
Yeah.
Couldn't find
Okay.
anything.
Huh.
So,
Interesting.
yeah. It is there though, however. If you check out our show notes when you're done, if you hit the links underneath the sapphire, there's a link to the actual letter. I'm not going to read it here tonight because it's lengthy. It was a lot of precautions, Enzo, yes. It is a lengthy letter, but it says everything here that I've already told you, just in a fancier way. So, they never open the box again. He passes on, and in January 1944, 12 months after his death, his daughter donated the lockbox and the contents and the letter to the National History Museum in London, where it stayed untouched until 1972. Exactly 33 years after his death, to the day.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't planned. It was actually found by a young curator for the museum. He found it in a stash of stuff in an old box somewhere and opened it up and found the gem and the letter and all the little doodads in the boxes.
And it just happened to be 33 years to the day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Within the week, actually. I don't know
That's
if it was exact day,
crazy.
but within the week. Isn't that, yeah, it's crazy. And that part is documented. So we know that's completely true. So what he knew about the 33 years or maybe maybe that's when the little stones and stuff that he put in there, the little amulets and things gave out. Maybe they only
Maybe.
lasted for 33 years before they went dead. I don't know. Maybe it's like a battery. It ran out. Anywho.
Fair enough.
So, after that, it was cleaned up, the letter displayed with the stone, and you can still see them there at the Natural History Museum in London. Many of the people there at the History Museum say that it isn't cursed, that they've never seen anything, but also a good handful of people who have worked personally with the stone or in charge of the stone in some way have said that they've run into some misfortunes, so they keep pretty clear of it unless they absolutely have to.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
That's
So
pretty wild.
Get that new intern
yeah.
to go take care of that stone for us.
The Delhi Purple Sapphire. And like I said, if you want to read the letter in its entirety, just get up and check out our show notes after we're done here, and you can find the link to it.
If they're really concerned about a curse, they could return it.
Right?
That would probably cure the curse.
I'm kind of interested, they should throw it in a canal somewhere and see if it comes back to them.
Sure.
Crazy.
Why not?
Okay, so moving on. The next thing up is we're going to talk a little bit about the Hope Diamond. And I will apologize right up front for the poor quality of this photo. I just wanted to share one that is an actual photo that I took. Because I actually got to see it for myself November 18th, 2009 at the National Gem and Mineral Collection at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. So most everyone has heard about the Hope Diamond. Let me switch pictures here real quick. I have a better one. There we go. Much better. So most everybody's heard about the Hope Diamond and about the famous curse that goes along with it. I think the one that actually came up with the majority of the story behind the curse was Pierre Cartier, who is he's famous from the Cartier jewelers. And in 1910, he told a story to Evelyn Walsh McLean and her husband Edward to try to entice them to buy this rock. And some of the story that he told is actually true and can be verified, but some of it's kind of iffy is a nice way to put it, I guess. But according to Cartier, several centuries ago, a man named I'm gonna massacre these names. I'll tell you right now. Tavernier made a trip to India, and while he was there, he stole this large blue diamond from the forehead or the eye of a statue of the Hindu goddess Sita. And for this theft, according to the legend, Tavernier was torn apart by wild dogs on a trip to Russia after he had sold the diamond. And so this has always been the first horrible curse attributed, or a horrible death attributed to the curse. Now, the next death was a Nicholas Fouquet. I'm telling you, I know whoever's hearing this and knowing how these are pronounced is probably screaming at me right now. He was a French official and he was executed. And then there's Princess de Lamballe. She was beaten to death by a French mob. And then Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were beheaded. They were the next owners. And then in 1908, Sultan Abdul Hamid of Turkey, he purchased the stone and he subsequently lost his throne and his love wore the diamond and she was slain. And then it goes to Greek jeweler Simon Monthrides, who was killed when he and his wife and his child rode over a precipice. And then the grandson of Henry Thomas Hope, and that's who the diamond is now named for, he died penniless. And then there was a Russian count and an actress who owned the stone in the early 20th century. They both came to bad ends. But researcher, his name is Richard Curran, he reports that many of these stories are misleading or they're just flat out lies, according to him. What we do know for sure is that when Louis XV died, his grandson, Louis XVI, became king with Marie Antoinette, and they were beheaded during the French Revolution. But was this a result of the diamond's curse? We don't know. Maybe. Now, during the Reign of Terror, when the French Revolution occurred, the crown jewels that included the blue diamond, they were taken from the royal couple after they attempted to flee France in like 1791. These jewels were not well guarded and they were stolen along with everything. Most were recovered, but not the blue diamond. Now, it turns up again in 1813, but I should say a large, now 44 karat blue diamond resurfaces in London in 1813. And they didn't know for sure until like the 2000s that if this was truly the original blue diamond or not. But yes, they now believe, most experts do believe that it is, mostly due to the rarity and the perfection of the French blue diamond. And it is likely that somebody recut it. And so if you look online, I didn't save that particular thing, but there are pictures of how the original size of the diamond, how you can overlay, and they match the cuts and the clarity and everything as it was whittled down over the years. So they do believe, because of this, that someone recut it in hopes of hiding its origin. But another interesting bit is another reason they think it is correct is it resurfaced just a few months after the statute of limitations ran out for you to be prosecuted for thefts during the war. So that was kind of a giveaway. And then in 1823, right? Just a little shady. And in 1823, it was owned by jeweler Daniel Eliasson. And then King George IV, he bought it. And upon his death, it was sold to pay off his debts. So he ran out of money, basically, during the time he owned it. And then by 1839, possibly a little earlier, it became in the possession of Henry Philip Hope. And he was one of the heirs of the banking firm Hope and Company, and he was a collector of fine art and gems and things. Now, he never married, so he left his estate to his 3 nephews when he died, and it went to the oldest of those nephews, and it was later passed through the family line down to Lord Francis Hope. But because of his gambling and high spending, he asked permissions of the courts in 1898 to sell the diamond, and his siblings were like, no. that's not going to happen. Well, he fought and fought, and finally in 1901 he was granted permission to sell it. He was pretty much penniless by that time. I think that's why they finally gave up. Now, there was an American jeweler. His name was Simon Frankel, and he bought the Hope Diamond in 1901, and he brought it to the United States. Now, it changed hands several times during the next few years. And during these few years is where Cartier was like, that included the Sultan, the actress, the Russian Count, if you believe him, and then it ended with Pierre Cartier. So he believed he found a buyer when he met Evelyn Walsh McLean. She had first seen the diamond in 1910 while she was visiting Paris with her husband. And she had told Cartier previously, before he ever offered this to her, that objects usually considered bad luck turned into good luck for her. So in his pitch, he emphasized, this has a huge negative history, and, it's cursed, and you're going to die, or you're going to lose all your money, and all these things. So the only problem was she didn't like the diamond in its current mounting. So she said no. And so he finally came back and was like, why don't you keep it for the weekend and see if you like it? And he knew he was a good salesman, obviously. So he knew that she would grow attached to it, and she did. And she went ahead and she bought the Hope Diamond. But when she did, her mother-in-law was just horrified. She couldn't believe that she'd bought this hugely cursed jewel. And she was like, send it back to Cartier, immediately. And so she persuaded Evelyn to do it. She sent it back to Cartier, and Cartier was like, nope. You bought it, you have to pay for it. He shipped it right back to her. And he ended up having to sue them to get the money. But he did. He sued them and he won. And so from that point on, she wore it around her neck. And there's even a story that they had to fight her to remove it when she had to have a goiter removed. She didn't want to take it off. And I'm like, did the goiter come from the diamond? Who knows? So, but soon, she always said that curses turned to good luck for her. Well, they did not. She did feel the curse. Her firstborn son, Vincent, he died in a car crash when he was only 9 years old. And then her daughter committed suicide when she was 25. And then in addition to all of this, her husband, he was declared insane and confined to a mental institution until he died in 1941. Oh, that's hilarious. Enzo, did the diamond have a new goiter in it? Or did the goiter have a new diamond in it? I said it backwards. That's awesome.
Nice dyslexia.
Yeah, right? So now her husband's in a mental institution, and he dies in 1941. She wanted all of her jewelry to go to her grandchildren, but it was put up for sale in order to settle debts from the estate. So she lost all her money as well in the end. Now, when it went to sell again in 1949, Harry Winston bought it. He was a famous New York jeweler. And on numerous occasions, he would offer the diamond to various ladies to be worn at balls to help raise money for charity. And then in 1958, he donated the Hope Diamond, to the Smithsonian to make it a focal point of like the newly established gem collection. And he wanted to inspire others to donate to the Smithsonian to help beef up this new exhibit. And then what is so crazy, this thing is worth millions of dollars. Even back in 1958, millions of dollars. It's hard to tell. I'm not sure. I didn't look up what its worth would be in today's money.
Probably priceless.
Probably
can't set a price.
Yeah, because it's so close to perfect. But what he did, he put it in registered mail. He paid $2.44 and put it in the mail and sent it in a plain brown box to the Smithsonian. I can't believe he did that. But it was met by a large group of people who were celebrating its arrival. And then it turned around that the Smithsonian received a whole bunch of letters, and newspaper stories were written saying, this ill-famed stone has been given to the country, basically. Now the country owns it. So now it means bad luck for the entire country. So what do you guys think? Do you think our country's been cursed since 1958?
Well, I don't
It
know
might
how
be.
long it's been cursed, but it might be.
Yeah.
It could answer
I
a few
looked up
questions, huh?
I looked up the estimated value. So
Ooh, what is it?
As of 2024, the estimated value, depending on the buyer, is anywhere from 200 to 350 million.
Wow.
Oh, good Lord.
That is
Yep.
nuts.
Over a
Mhm.
$250 million.
Yeah.
That
Well,
is
it's
nuts.
it's 45.52 carats.
Yeah, it's
That's
huge.
that's a big stone.
It's a big ol' hunkin', and it's so close to being perfect. It's one of the most perfect diamonds ever. So on top of it even being so large, it's so perfect. They hit it with, like, I can't remember if it was, some kinda light, I can't remember, but it glows fire red when it's hit, and it's because of the clarity of it. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Nice.
yay. Okay, the next thing up, Mark, it's your turn
We're
with
going to talk about, pardon my French, the little bastard, or the car that killed James Dean, who was a young actor with only one movie under his belt and working on his second. Now, this is an interesting story. Um, just because, James Dean was so popular at the time. His true love was auto racing. He was a race car driver, amateur. He got the car 9 days before he died. And the story goes that he was at a restaurant and met Alec Guinness, who was a young man at the time, fairly young man, and invited him to share their table because the restaurant was full. Before they went in, he insisted on showing Alec the car. And according to uh, Sir Alec Guinness's um, own testimony, he had a bad feeling about the car and said, if you get into that car within 1 week from today by 10:30, whatever day it was, let's just call it a Thursday. By 10:30 Thursday, you'll be dead. Well, 9 days after he bought the car, uh, James and the mechanic that they hired to work on it for the race were traveling at a high rate of speed down a highway, and a car turned in front of them. And basically, they had a head on collision approximately 85 miles per hour. The mechanic miraculously was thrown free and relatively undamaged. Uh, Young man, Mr. Dean, passed away at the scene, broken neck. Uh, and that would seem to be the end of the story. But the insurance company, finding that there was quite a bit of the car, including the engine and much of the suspension, was salvageable, went ahead and sold the remains of the car. Well, uh, doctor in the area bought the uh, bought the engine and put it in a race car that he was driving, and proceeded to have an accident. And he had sold parts of the car to a friend of his, also a doctor, who had a steering malfunction and ran his car into a tree, killing him. And there were several cars that these parts went to that had fatal or near fatal accidents. And then another man bought the remains of the car and took it on the car show circuit. And many people who touched the car were cut or fell and broke their hip or had other misfortunes um, related to the car.
it's like Christine.
So, yeah, so whether the car was truly cursed or not, I can't say, but there was a lot of strange things that happened adjacent to this vehicle.
Mhm.
So, and
Totally
not to
sad.
mention the fact, uh, James Dean was, he was an up and coming actor. He had a brilliant career ahead of him.
He did.
and I'm sure we missed out on quite a bit of entertainment.
Mhm.
So
I agree. It's really sad.
it's really kind of a short story. I mean, we could probably spend all night breaking it down, all the individual things, but it just there was a lot of misfortune
Mhm.
associated with this
Yeah.
car and its remains. So it's quite
Yeah.
the rabbit hole to go down.
It is.
We could actually do an entire show just on that topic if we
Uh,
wanted to.
The
And
car
the
was in,
insanity of, like, after the car was, because I know at one point the car was dismantled and different parts of it went out here and there,
yeah, it's the
and
engine and suspension.
stuff stemmed from that too. People were having
Yeah.
issues with the bits and pieces that they
Yes,
had,
at
so,
least one fatality, yes.
Mhm.
yeah. So,
Um,
it's crazy.
so
Are
yeah,
all
and
the pieces accounted for? Do you know?
I don't know if all the pieces are accounted. It got pretty torn up.
Mhm.
I think the main part of the car is actually in a museum now.
Oh, wow,
Um,
good. At least they're not sending him out to other things. And Alicia asked, was Stephen King's book Christine based on that car? I'm not 100% sure, but it sure I could see it being based on it.
I don't think it was, but there were several people killed in relation to the parts of the car.
Mhm.
Now, uh, James Dean was fairly inexperienced as a race driver, and several people had made the comment that they thought that that was too much car for the young man to have. It was overpowered for its size, and I don't know how many people here have driven a rear engine car of any sort, but the back end has an unfortunate tendency in a rear wheel or a rear engine vehicle with that much power has a bad tendency to try to pass the front end.
Mm.
Um, so when he tried to outdrive the car that turned in front of him, he lost control, and it's very easy to do. Even my 63 Corvair had enough power when I tromped on it to get awfully squirrely. So I cannot imagine what that Porsche with that engine set up to race.
It's almost like
Uh,
I know it was quite a few years later, but it's almost Paul Walker, you know, all over.
yeah,
Or
it
I should
was
say Paul Walker would be James Dean all over again.
yeah, yeah. It was they're a tricky car to drive. Anything with what they call a mid engine like that can be tricky. I personally have also driven, don't laugh, a Fiero that someone, I'm not going to name names, someone put a 400 Pontiac engine in the back of it because they read about it in a magazine.
Oh my.
And let me tell
Like I know
you,
what that means. Listen to me. Oh my.
it is a very large engine for a very
It's a
small car.
large.
And I drove it for about 2 miles and nearly died 6 times. So, yes, Enzo, that actually fits into a Pontiac Fiero. You only have to drill 2 holes to move the motor mounts, and a small
Wow.
block 400 fits in quite nicely.
That's crazy.
Kids, do
Wow.
not try this at home. It has been tried, and it is not safe.
For
So,
sure.
having driven a car like that, I can see where he would lose control quite easily and flip it. I think it was 5 or 6 times.
Yeah. It turned a lot.
Yeah, there it was too. Yes, exactly, Rick. That it was bad. Must have thrown off from the plastic body panels.
That's funny.
Maybe so, but I mean, it, I can see it. And then the other deaths, it's probably a bad idea to put suspension parts from a wrecked vehicle into your race car.
Do you think they did it
So
mostly because of where it well, they didn't know where it came from in most
no,
cases,
no,
did
it was
they?
bought from the insurance company. They didn't. I don't believe most of these people knew where the parts came from. Um, suspension parts out of a wrecked vehicle are kind of sketchy anyway. I would not do it. So whether it's a curse or merely um, bad judgment trying to be on a budget, I don't know. But these things all happened. Um, most everything, if you go and look through the story, most everything can be verified. So whether it's a curse or not, or just bad judgment, that's for you guys to decide.
Crazy. That is a good one, though. And Jess is right. We could do an entire show just on it. It'd be a good
Yeah.
We
show.
could.
It is. I mean, I've got pages and pages of data, and I mean, we've only got so much time on the show. So
I know. And Pam got us started late, so yay.
We got it.
If I had $1 for every mistake I've made podcasting,
I won't
I'd
make
have
that
$1 million.
mistake again. I can guarantee you.
I would have $1 million. I wouldn't need to work.
Next show, I'll make another mistake, and then I'll say I won't never make that one again either. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Mark. That was really cool. The next thing up, it's called the Conjure Chest. And this one I hadn't really heard a whole lot about. So I was pretty excited when I found it because it's kind of a big deal. At least in Kentucky, it's a big deal. This, I'll give you the description from the Kentucky Museum of History. It's an empire-style mahogany veneered chest of drawers, and it has 4 drawers. The top drawer is curved and extends out beyond the other 3. There are panels at each end of the piece at the sides of the top drawer, and there's a acanthus leaf design on these panels. There's scroll work at the top of the columns on each side that have turned work, and a ball on top and turned work at the bottom. The legs are turned and have casters. And there's a reason I read it in its entirety, because this wasn't a piece of furniture that was just slapped together. There was some care and craftsmanship that really went into this.
It's beautiful.
And it is. It's gorgeous. Yes, Enzo, I promise I will never do that one again. I'm not promising I'll never make any more because, like I said, I'm sure there'll be another one at the next show. Anyway, okay, so with this particular chest, there are 18 deaths associated with it. And obviously, it took them a while to realize that these were connected through this chest of drawers. But once they did, they were like, yikes. And so this chest of drawers was donated by Virginia Carey Hudson Maine to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1976. And with the words, "This chest haunted the Maines family for generations." And actually, its reputation extends outside of Kentucky because for a time it was sent somewhere else. But it did travel to Las Vegas in 2015, where it was featured in season 1 of Travel Channel's Deadly Possessions. And I was shocked because I guess I never watched that show because I didn't. I
I've
ran
never
across
heard of
it
that show.
somewhere.
I will have
I
to look it
know.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it either.
But on this show, paranormal investigator Zach Baggins, that's probably why I didn't know about it.
That's
Yeah.
why I didn't see it.
Yep. He interviewed Virginia Carey Hudson Maine's daughter, Beverly, about her mother's motivation to donate this chest to the Kentucky Historical Society. And what Beverly said was she really didn't think that her mother would turn it loose. And the main reason was she's like, could you imagine setting this thing out on the curb where somebody could pick it up and might accidentally put items in it and then die and not know why? So she felt that it needed to be preserved, but kept away from people that could innocently be harmed by the curse that was on it, and it put it in a place where it would never be used. So the conjured chest story, it was first described in a letter from Virginia to her daughter, whose name is also Virginia, not to get confusing or anything there. But Cleveland's grandmother, Eliza, had told her this story as a child. And Eliza had once she told her this story, Virginia eventually put it into a book. And the book was called Flapdoodle, Trust and Obey, which is interesting. But she changed the names in the book at the time so no one would know who it was. But then in 2017, Beverly, Virginia's daughter, she published a book called The Conjured Chest, A Cursed Family in Old Kentucky, which you can actually, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read on it. It's only
Nice.
48 pages, and I think it's like $1.99 if you want to purchase it too. So it's pretty interesting. But honestly, I'm going to give you most of the information here. So do with that what you will. She goes through Beverly goes through and identifies the actual names of the victims and their relations to the family. And according to family history, the chest was likely built in Kentucky around 1830, possibly in Meade County, because that's where the family resided. But it begins when Jeremiah Graham, he was making preparations for his firstborn child. And so in doing so, he had this chest of drawers built, and it was hand carved, and it was made by an enslaved man to the family, and his name was Remus. Well, once he got this built, Jeremiah wasn't satisfied with the chest. So he beat Remus, and Remus died from his injuries. In order to avenge Remus's death, the other enslaved African Americans sprinkled dried owl blood inside the drawers, and they put a curse on it. And then the chest was moved into the child's nursery. So, I mean, it was horrible from the beginning. I can't imagine anybody not being happy with that, though.
It is
So
absolutely a gorgeous piece of
it's,
furniture. I
yeah.
can't imagine what something new that nice would cost one.
Mm-hmm. So tragedy did continue every time somebody put their clothing into this chest. 16 people are believed to have had misfortune due to the curse. And then in addition, both the chest maker Remus and then the curse breaker that we'll learn about here in a little bit, her name was Sally. She died, making a total of 18 deaths related to this chest that can be confirmed. So Jeremiah Graham's child, for whom the chest was made, he died in infancy. Jeremiah's twin brother, Jonathan, he had a son. That son's clothes were placed in the chest, and he was stabbed by his body servant on his 21st birthday and died. So at that point, they weren't making a connection. Obviously, it's too early on. And at that point, Jeremiah and Jonathan's sister-in-law put the chest in the attic. And then comes along John Ryan. He had recently immigrated from Ireland, and he eloped with Catherine Winchell, which Amanda Winchell Graham was the Graham family. She arranged for him to live on the land that belonged to the Grahams, and she gave him the chest. It had been standing in the attic. So she gave them the chest. They both used it. Farm life left them extremely poor, and it made Catherine very ill. And John planned to go to New Orleans to find work, and he was killed in an accident on the way there. And then Catherine died shortly after that. And then the next person to use it was Louise Gregory. She was a child of Eliza Ryan and John David Gregory, and she died around the age of 10. And then their only son, Eliza and John's only son, his name was Ernest, and he married a lady named Stella. Stella put her wedding clothes in it. They wed in 1895, and she died within 2 years of the wedding. And then next is Mabel Louise Whitehead. She was a relative of the Gregory family. She came to live with them, and she married a guy named Wilbur. And in 1901, they had a baby named Chester, whose clothes went in the chest, and he died at 2 weeks old. And then Wilbur Harlan's clothes were placed in the chest. Excuse me. His clothes were placed in the chest, and he died 4 years later after the baby died. So then the chest goes to John David Gregory's nephew, Emmett. And she had knitted gloves and a scarf in the chest for her son's Christmas gift. And Emmett worked for the railroad. And one evening, he got off the train, and he fell through the trestles 30 feet and died.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. And then Nellie Gregory, she was the daughter of Eliza and John David Gregory. She married a guy named Fred Fraze in 1905. She put her wedding clothes in it, and then Fred left her. He deserted her, which that was horrible in 1905, to be deserted.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He didn't die, but she was left. And then Eliza Gregory's husband, John David, he died in 1908. So she rearranged her house, and she moved the chest into her room. And then she took her own life and died in 1915. And then the chest moves to Louisville with Eliza and John David's granddaughter, which comes into the Virginia Carrie Hudson Cleveland. And her husband, Curtly. Virginia put her first child's baby clothes in the chest, and the baby was born prematurely and died the same day. And then
Oh.
Virginia and Curtly had 2 daughters, the second being Anne Carey. And Anne's clothing was placed in the chest, and she was struck with polio around 1929. She did recover, but she was never, she had to endure really difficult symptoms her entire life because of it. Sometimes there's worse things than death, you know.
That is
Yeah.
true.
And then you've got Virginia and Curtly's oldest daughter. Her name was Virginia Hudson Cleveland. She put her wedding clothes in it, and she married Wilbur Breister in 1943. And in December of 44, he was rushed to the hospital with an appendectomy, and he died I think the day after from an overdose of ether. And then
Goodness.
it's crazy, isn't it? And then their neighbor, his name was Sonny Moore. He put his hunting clothes in the chest, and he was killed with a gun accident at the home of the neighbors within a year. And then Richard, he was Virginia and Curtly's son. He put his clothes in the chest, and less than a week later, he was stabbed through the hand at school. So he didn't die, but he was stabbed. And then Virginia had enough of it at this point. They're seeing a pattern, obviously, and she didn't want anybody else to die or be hurt. So she asked Sally. Sally's a maid who worked for her most of her life, and she asked her if she knew how to break a conjure. And so Sally was like, yeah, but it's going to be hard to do, but we can do it. And so what we need to do, we need to get a dead owl that has been brought unasked by a friend. I don't know how they managed that, but they did. And then she had to take the leaves from a willow tree planted by another friend and boil them for one day inside of the dead owl. And the next, she was put the liquid in a jug and bury it with the handle facing east under a flowering bush. And if it worked, either Virginia or Sally would die before all the leaves fell off the bush in the fall. And Sally died the following September. And to this day, some of the owl feathers remain in the top drawer at the museum to keep the curse at bay.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Holy cow.
Break a curse at the cost of your own life. That's something else right there.
Right? Well, yeah, I mean, and it wasn't even, Sally was the one that I'm getting lost here. There we go. Sally wasn't the one that asked to break the curse. She's the one that brought how to do it. So it's kind of sad that it happened that way. But yeah, that's the conjure chest. How crazy is that? Now I want to go to Kentucky just to see it.
Yeah. I've never heard of the conjure chest, so
I thought it was
super interesting. And it's so sad for such a beautiful piece too.
I know.
Enzo said a fireman's axe sounds easier.
And that is the owl. That is the feathers that are in the chest.
Owl feathers. Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
What a hoot.
Oh. Wah, wah.
All right. Moving on. So we're sticking with furniture. So I got the wonderful job of researching this, and boy howdy, I think this is probably on par with the chest, the insanity of this chair. I've heard of this chair before, but I didn't know the extent of the curse that comes along with it. Oh, haha, Enzo. He says my joke is now cursed. So the chair you're looking at, it looks like just a plain old chair, but this is a special chair. This is called the Thomas Busby chair, or the Deadly Stoop chair, or the Dead Man's chair. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Right? So, estimates on this chair suggest that there was well over 60 deaths.
Wow.
And I'm not talking about 60 deaths of somebody who knew somebody who was near it. I'm talking about people who sat in this chair. Well over 60. We're, of course, not going to go over all 60 because we would be here all night. I'm going to touch on some of the big ones, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of history on the chair, because the gentleman who owned this chair was quite the character. So we're going to start in on that first. So you can see this chair today, if you want, in Thirsk, North Yorkshire, England. It's in their history museum there. It's a little town, but they have a little museum, and you can go see it. And as you see on the picture, you can't actually sit in the chair. They've solved that issue by hanging it high on a wall, so no one is tempted anymore to sit in this
Smart.
thing. Yeah. Now, Busby himself, he was a character, as I said. He was a thug. He was a thief. He was an all-around not nice guy. He was a drunk. And he happened to own the local inn there in Thirsk, somewhere around the late 1600s. He married at one point to a woman named Elizabeth, who was the daughter of Daniel Awetty, who was also a crook. And he spent his time on his little local farm making fake coins. So he was processing fake money.
Nice.
That's how they met. They joined in and started this little venture together doing the fake coinage. He fell in love with the daughter and married her. Happy little group, I suppose. So, because Busby was a horrible drunk and had an attitude, he was always fighting with his partner in crime there, Awetty, getting into fights and accusing each other of things and blah, blah, blah. And one day they had a fight so bad that Awetty showed up at Busby's inn and was like, I'm taking my daughter back. You can't be married to her anymore. I'm taking her, and I'm taking the business, and I'm out of here. So Busby, being ticked off and like, you can't do this to me, kicks him out, and takes Elizabeth and hides her away. And then he shows up at Awetty's, right? And bashes his head in over and over again, basically bludgeons him to death, drags his body out into the local woods and hides him, and goes back to the inn as if nothing ever happened. Well, after a while, people started noticing that Awetty was missing, sent out a search party for him because they assumed maybe he'd gotten drunk and wandered off into the woods. They found him in the woods, brutalized to death. And they also found the hammer that he did it with, because he just left it there with the body.
Dang.
Well,
They knew it was Busby's hammer, so right?
He wasn't trying to hide it, was he?
No, he really, really wasn't. So they marched up to the inn and they arrested Busby and charged him with murder. Threw him in jail. So in the summer of 1702, he was tried and sentenced to be gibbeted. Now, this is something new for me. I don't know. Have you heard the word gibbeted?
Gibbeted.
I know what gibbeted is. Yes.
Okay. It was new to me. I'll explain it. Gibbeted is basically just being hung from the gibbets. And the gibbets is nowadays what we would call, like a guillotine. Well, not a guillotine, excuse me. What am I trying to say? Oh, gallows.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. A gallows. So basically, he was going to be hung. But along with being gibbeted, besides the fact that you're hung, after you're dead, they take your body down and they dip you in tar and they hang you on a post beside the gallows for all people to see.
So they make
right?
they make a lesson out of you too at the same time.
Yeah. That's being gibbeted, right? So this happens to Busby. They hang him, they dip him in tar, and they hang him on a post at the gallows. And the post just happens to be straight across the street from his inn. Right? Later, just a year later, it gets new in ownership, and they renamed the inn the Busby Stoop Inn. I guess just to mock his death. Right?
Wow.
Never mock the dead. That is a bad idea.
If
It
you want to pick one.
retained, yeah, the inn stuck around and it didn't close until 2012, and it retained that name up until it closed in 2012, right? So, the story of the curse. So, the basis for the haunting of the chair or the curse of the chair itself has three versions, and I'll let you all decide which one you think it is. So, the first one was that Busby was granted his dying wish to sit in his favorite chair and have one last drink before he was marched off to the gallows. And as he finished his drink, he cursed anyone who dare sit in his chair from then on out. The second one is that Busby shouted that anyone who was going to sit in his chair would die on his way to being hauled to the gallows. And then the third one is that the chair simply took on the curse, having been haunted by Busby as his favorite chair, and a Waddy having been murdered after sitting in it. Because apparently part of the story is that a Waddy was sitting in his chair when he tried to take Elizabeth away from Busby.
Mm.
Right? So those are the three, like, maybe how it happens, and you all can choose whichever you want. The inn itself was also reportedly haunted by Busby too, not just the chair. So there were flickering lights and chairs that got toppled over, and all the noises and knocks and all of that.
Yeah, it could totally be any of them.
Yeah. So the chair itself was considered to be horribly haunted and cursed, and would supposedly kill anyone who dared to sit in it. And like I said before, estimates show it was somewhere a little over 60 people, and those are the ones that they accounted for. And like I said, I'm not going to list them all here, but I'm going to list some of the more interesting ones. So in 1914, a chimney sweep sat in the chair, and he was found the next day dead, hanging from the gibbet post that Busby had been on.
Wow.
And later on, they tracked down a friend of his who finally fessed up to murdering him and hanging him on it that night.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. During World War II, the pub was super popular with the RCAF airmen in the area, and they would take bets on each other on who would dare to sit in the chair. And all of those who did reportedly never made it back from their next missions, if they made it back to their bases at all, right? So in 1968, two airmen sat in the chair, and they both died as they left the inn when their car left the road and hit a tree straight on. Like, it didn't like bounce off the road or something. It just drove straight into a tree.
Plowed straight into it.
Yep.
Wow.
Just an example of some of those that happened. In the 1970s, it claimed a number of victims. So we had a cleaning lady who sat in it, who the next day was diagnosed with a inoperable tumor, and she was gone within the month. A number of cyclists and motorcyclists who suffered fatal road accidents leaving the inn. A hitchhiker who was run over when he left. A man who suffered a fatal heart attack after leaving the chair. He was still in the inn. He got up from the chair and had a heart attack. A group of construction men dared one of theirs to sit there, and when they returned to their work site after lunch, he fell through the roof and died on the concrete 3 stories below.
Good grief.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave it there because there's tons of them, all just little stories like that. So the current owner at the time that the gentleman who fell through the roof, when that happened, the owner at the time decided to move the chair to the basement because he was feeling very guilty for these people sitting in this chair and then dying. He moved it just down to the basement and forgot about it. Meanwhile, a delivery man showed up with deliveries to put down into the basement, and he needed a break. So he sat down in the chair, not knowing the story behind it. Right?
Oh, man.
He took his break, got up, and left the building, and his van promptly went off the road, and he was killed instantly.
Holy cow.
Yes, right?
Jeez.
So at this point, the owner has decided that the chair is too dangerous to even keep anymore. He wants it out of his building. So he donated it to the Thirst Museum because it had such a history to it, where they decided to display it, but of course, up on the wall so that no one could ever sit in it again.
Smart.
Um, but unfortunately, the chair came with another issue because Busby followed it. The inn was no longer haunted after that, but the
Oh
museum
no.
was.
Great.
You know what
Yeah.
they should do to the chair? They should take it to a prison, and then you've got a new sentence: death by curse. You must
Death
sit in
by
the
Busby.
chair. You will
There
be
you
dead by
go.
morning.
Enzo, that's a
Yeah,
great point.
yeah. Enzo said that's unusual. It even killed people that didn't know about the curse. Yeah, it
Mhm.
did. I the cleaning lady who was diagnosed with the tumor didn't know. She just came in and sat down to have a meal. A lot of these people didn't know. And a lot of them did, of course. So a lot of bets were taken and you won't sit in the chair and then
And there is a thought that some curses are a little bit psychosomatic, where
yes.
if you know about the curse and you're exposed to it, then you freak yourself out, you psych yourself out into
Yeah.
actually, but
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Pretty
Yeah.
wild.
I
That's a
know.
good
So, yeah,
one.
if anyone wants to see it in person, just visit the little museum in Thirsk, Yorkshire.
Cool. Okay.
Mhm.
We're going to start moving along here. Oh, Enzo, can you put the chair in the conjure chest? It's a good question. Maybe
Mm.
it will die.
That's a good way to
Hmm,
kill a curse.
it is. Okay, the next one. This is the Catskills crone, and you may not know her by this name, but you may have heard of her. Um, Greg and Dana Newkirk, they are a couple based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and they are behind the documentary Hellier. And in 2003, they released their latest documentary called The Unbinding. And the focus of The Unbinding is this wooden effigy that they call the Catskills crone. So if you guys haven't heard of her, or if you haven't seen Hellier, you need to watch it. It's really cool.
Mm.
So in 2023, the Newkirks launched their own podcast, and it's called the Haunted Objects Podcast. And it's truly one of the best ones out there. I know that all three of us highly recommend it. And you can
Mhm.
listen to it anywhere, but you can really get the full effect if you watch them on YouTube. They are hilarious, and they are extremely knowledgeable about what they do. Now, when they were drafting up ideas for their podcast episodes, the Catskills crone, she was high on their list, but it was like way too involved to fit into just one episode. So they decided to make it into a documentary, a full length documentary, and it's really really good. Um, Greg and Dana, they have run a traveling museum of the paranormal for years. And in that time, they started to get requests from people to take haunted or cursed objects off their hands. So they started to do this. They started to accept them in. And even now, they get a dozen packages a week at least from people who believe that they have a haunted objects and they want to get it out of their lives. And Greg and Dana, they don't charge a fee to do this. And they get a lot of things that you might typically think are haunted, like dolls and clowns and paintings and things like that. And as Greg puts it, it isn't that they don't believe someone when they say an object is haunted, but he thinks that a person's interactions with this thing is a big part of why they are haunted. So when you have a connection between the person that has the experience with the object and then that object itself, uh, when that connection is severed, the object doesn't act the same anymore. It kind of releases whatever thing it had going on. And Greg states that like 9 times out of 10, they don't experience anything from the objects they receive, but there's that other 10% where things can get interesting. And then maybe of that, there's like a 1% that changes. And this is a direct quote by him. It's occasionally there's 1% that changes the way that you think about haunted objects. And that's where the crone came in. Now, She wasn't an object that was just put in the mail to them, but in January 2016, there's a paranormal subreddit, and it's one that uh, Greg's in a lot too. But there was a story posted there about how a guy and one of his friends, they were on this mountain, and they found it was in the Catskills, and they found this strange effigy in a cave, and they were like, did they say, hey, cool, this probably means something to somebody, and we shouldn't mess with it and walk away? No, they did not. They did what you're not supposed to do, and they took it home with them. Don't ever do that, guys. If you're out somewhere and you find something and it looks like somebody handmade it and it was done with meaning, leave it alone. You don't know what the deal
Leave
is
it
with that.
alone.
Leave it alone. Now the friend,
Danger, Will Robinson.
exactly.
Mhm.
So one of the friends, the one that took the effigy to his house, he almost immediately began to have experiences with it in his home. He was losing sleep. There was banging happening in the house. He kept feeling like something was watching him. And he could smell this really strong smell of pond water. And then the statue started moving around the house on its own. And he would find it in a different room. And he was like, is my dog doing this? No, his dog was not doing it. His dog wouldn't go anywhere near the darn thing because he was scared to death of it. And then something knocks on his front door about 3 o'clock in the morning. And what does he do? He opens it and there's nobody there. So that's another big no-no. If something knocks on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, don't open it. You don't know what you just gave permission to come into your house just by opening the door. As soon as but this guy figured that out. As soon as he realized there was nobody there, he's like, oh no, he knew he made this huge mistake. And he especially knew he made this huge mistake when muddy footprints started showing up in his home. So he was like, I'm done. This is crazy. Grabbed his dog, went to the friend that he had hiked out with, went to his house and started staying in his guest room. So at that point, they're like, okay, we need to do something about this. This is getting out of hand. So they contacted the Newkirks, and they were like, hey, we want to send this to you, put it in your paranormal museum, whatever you want to do with it. We don't want it. Now, Greg and Dana, they're really cool people, and they don't want to come across as like, oh, give it to us, we'll fix all your problems. They don't do that. What they do is they're like, okay, we're not going to solve your problem for you. We want to give you the tools so that you can solve your own problems. And so that's what they did. Greg gave him some advice. He said, you need to sit down and talk to it and say, look, I apologize. We should have never taken you from where you were. We're going to take you back. And did the guys do that? No, they didn't. They were like too scared. They went back to the house to try to do that. They looked for the effigy. It wasn't where they left it. And they found it in the hallway. And it had been thrown at a wall so hard that there was a big hole in the drywall where it had hit. And they heard something. And when they turned and looked in another room, they both saw an old woman she looked like she was naked and wet with her head down. So I'm thinking The Ring, when they say that, you just see that figure that's wet and everything. They saw her, they were like, we're out, jetted out of there. And they're like, okay, we can't do this. We're just going to send it to you. We don't care if you want it or not, you're getting it. And so at that point, Greg and Dana were like, okay, whatever, send it to us. So they did. And a couple of days later, it comes in the mail. And when it arrived, they did with it what they do with everything they get. They unpacked it and they laid it out and they took pictures from all sides of it. And then they put it back in its box, and they put it away. And when they described it, as you can see it here, it's handmade, obviously, and it's got nails nailed into the eyes, and there's a noose around its neck. And if you look at it, you can tell the nails and the noose look very intentional, So they took pictures of it. This is one of the pictures that they took. And when they were done, they packed it up. And they said, usually when it comes to things that come into the museum, this is where it ends. They receive it, they take pictures, and nothing else happens after that. But in this case, things started to happen almost immediately. And if things do start to happen, that's when they will take it out and they'll study the object. Now, the curious thing with this one is they almost immediately began to experience phenomena that seemed to be directly related to the crone. Um, in the room that they kept it, they put up a trail cam and nothing happened right away. But then it triggered like 3 times in one night. And so when they started to look through the shots, they noticed an orb, which orbs are iffy. But in this particular case, the orb is emitting its own light, which is that's not dust. Dust doesn't emit its own light. So that caught their attention. And then when they were trying to look through the photos, the 3 photos to tell where the orb had come from, they realized that where it originated from was by the crone, and the crone had moved just a little bit. And so they were like, okay, this is even more interesting now, something's really up. So they ruled out things. There were other things sitting on the table that the crone was on. But the crone was, it's a solid piece of wood and it's not light. And there were things on the table that were lighter than the crone and they had not moved. So that ruled out, vibration from a truck going by, or, for that case, even like a minor earthquake or anything. Nothing else had moved at all. So they got a little excited, when that happened. Okay, this is, there's something really going on with this thing. And so, excitement only lasts so long until the thing shows up in your bedroom in the middle of the night. And then it's like, okay, yeah, no, this isn't cool anymore. So Dana actually saw it. She saw it standing in their closet, and she tried to wake up Greg, and Greg's half asleep and trying to figure out. By the time he got awake and could tell what was going on, it was gone. But he totally believed Dana, no problem there. So the next thing that happens, 2 wet footprints show up on the back of their couch. And so, your mind always goes to trying to figure out how something truly happened. So they're like, okay, so Dana's like, Greg, did you take a shower and then stand on the back of the couch? And he was like, why in the hell would I do something like that? No, I did not. And so they did take pictures of it. And so they're really good at documenting stuff, which is awesome. So they took those pictures and realized that things are actually starting to line up with what other people had experienced with this particular object. So Greg took his own advice that he gives everybody else, and he brought it in and to have a conversation with it. And he said, look, this is a coexistence. If you need help, we'll try to help you. And while he's saying this, they start hearing rushing water like a waterfall. And they both take off to the other end of the house where they're hearing it from, because they've had busted pipes before. And they're like, oh, great. We got to get this under control before it ruins whatever it's coming down on. Well, they get to the other side of the house and there's no water leak. But at that same time, they start hearing a series of loud thumps from the living room where they just came from. So they go back in and the crone's gone. It's not sitting on the table anymore, on the coffee table. And they eventually find it. It's off under the TV. So Greg gets down to pull it out. And when he's down, Dana's pretty close to him and she screams and she catches the TV right as it was flipping over onto his head. So they were like, at that point, Greg's like, okay, that's how it's going to be. Stick you in a box. I'm going to lock it up and stick you on a shelf. And they heard 3 loud bangs and he's like, okay, done. And he stuck it in a box and they didn't bring it out again until they went on the road again with their paranormal museum. And they brought it with them, but they weren't bringing it out, just to set on display or anything. And they do hold, like, before they were doing their podcast, they have a Patreon. So they had people that were patrons that would get on for live streams like 2 or 3 times a month. And they would do investigations and they would talk about things that had come into the museum that were really cool. This was one of those things that they had talked about. So when they're at this Paracon, there's a guy there that comes up and he's pretty much came 3 or 4 times to the table, hey, please, I just want to see it. I've got to see it. It's so interesting. I got to lay eyes on it. And finally they were like, okay, fine. So they take it out of the box. And when they take it out of the box, they said it was immediately like something just rushed through the room. It went down the aisle and it made the lights swing. And people's stuff was knocked over. And towards the end, there was a man who immediately had a violent seizure and started having blood dripping out of his nose. And so they were like, and the guy that wanted to see it witnesses all this. And he's like, starts crying. And he's like, I'm so sorry, put it away. So they did. And then Greg and Dana were like, yeah, we can't bring this out again. We can't, this is dangerous. It's beyond just interesting. It's dangerous. So that from that point on, they started working on a way to get the crone back to where she came from. And they did determine that they spoke with different experts and they did a lot of research on their own. They did determine that she appears to be Mokosh, which is a Slavic goddess, which makes sense because where she was found is in an area that has a large Ukrainian settlement. And they say they are not sure that they came face to face with the goddess itself, but they are sure that they brushed up against something that is absolutely more than a ghost. Dana herself, she's a practicing witch, and she worked up the safe, excuse me, hang on.
It's the curse.
It is. She worked up the safest and best way to return the crone. And what the unbinding is, it's this amazing documentary that follows this process to return the crone and to remove the discord that surrounds it from all of their lives. And I highly recommend it. I know the other guys here do too. It is available on Amazon Prime. They continuously learn more about this thing, even today. And again, they co-host the Haunted Objects podcast. So it's just fantastic. And I would highly recommend anybody to watch it. But if you want to learn more about them, that's where I would start, is with the Haunted Objects podcast. I think it's fascinating. And they didn't take it out on the road with them. They took it back. They ended up burying it and did a whole ritual around it to make sure it stayed that way, and released it when they were there. So, yeah, you can find out more about it on the Unbinding.
Yeah, definitely watch it. Pam gave you like a little overview of kind of what happened. There's so much more detail and weirdness
Much more.
and scans that they took where weird stuff showed up on it that shouldn't
Mhm.
have been there. And it's just really interesting. If you get a chance, check it out, because it's really frightening, actually, some of the stuff that happens.
It is. It's crazy. It's one of my favorite stories right now. I'll have another one soon, I'm sure. But yeah, this one's fascinating.
Remember,
Yeah.
folks, do not pick up strange objects in the woods.
And
And
no,
for-
Levi, do
For
not.
the
If you
love
find a
of God,
monkey's
don't take them
paw,
home.
yeah. If you find a monkey's paw, do not take it home.
Yeah, not a good idea.
No, not at all.
It's the monkey.
All right, Jess, it's your turn.
It's my turn. So what are we doing first? Are we going to do the crying boy, or are we doing... Okay, we'll do the
Let's do
crying boy
Crying
first.
Boy.
Yeah, so a lot of people actually kind of know a little bit about this, or have at least kind of heard about it a little bit. The crying boy fires. So, holy cow. The crying boy, and this is only one version that you're seeing right here. The gentleman who painted them, Giovanni Bragolin, or actually his real name was Bruno Amadio, that was his pen name, painted over 60 versions of the crying boy. It was his only bestseller. The rest of his art, it got poo-pooed. Nobody much cared for it. He started this crying boy series, and they were especially popular in the UK. Everybody had them. And like I said, this is just one version of it that you're seeing here. So he started painting them in the 1950s on through the 70s, and even a little bit up into the 80s. And it actually caught on. There was couple other artists in the area that also did a couple of crying boy versions. What they were enamored with so much, I have no idea why you would want a picture of an upset crying child.
It looks
on your
depressing.
wall. It's very depressing. So, when we're talking about the fires, so this sprung up in the UK in the mid 80s. It wasn't that long ago. or I guess it kind of was a little long ago. 80s to me
Well,
isn't that
not
long
to
ago.
us. I mean,
I'm showing my age. So there were over 60 fires reported, with the paintings found intact inside the destroyed homes. So these portraits seemed indestructible, and they also seemed to cause the fires a lot of the times. And I'm going to go over a little bit of the history with you and a sampling of the fires so you can kind of get a general idea. So on September 5th, 1985, The Sun, which was a British tabloid, kind of like what we have here, reported that an Essex firefighter was claiming that undamaged copies of the Crying Boy painting were being frequently found in the ruins of burned homes. Um, and the reports actually became so widespread, and the paper kept up on them so much, they started organizing mass bonfires of these things. That the people were sending in. At one point, they actually had 2,500 copies of them in a extra spare room at the newspaper office because they didn't
oh,
have
good
any place to
Lord.
store them. The hilarious thing is, I think it's hilarious. They planned bonfires to destroy them, but they were being gotten rid of because a fire would happen and they wouldn't burn. So
I'm
I'm
surprised
not.
it didn't burn down the sun.
That's freaky.
Anywho, so this started off the firefighter that I spoke of. His name was Peter Hall. He was the one that released this information to the paper, and he had spoke up about it initially because he had been so concerned. They had been having all these fires, and they were finding these intact paintings of crying boys, where the rest of the artwork nearby was completely destroyed. The rooms were gutted, but these paintings were being found completely intact. No charring, just as if someone had walked in after the fire and set it down. So the reason why he turned this in originally is because of his brother. His brother's name was Ron Hall, and he was a huge skeptic. He kept telling his brother all about this. You'll never believe this, Ron. We found another painting today. We found another painting today. And he thought it was all poppycock. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. And he went and bought his own copy of The Crying Boy and displayed it in his home with him and his wife and his kids lived. And the next day, the firefighters pulled that Crying Boy painting out of what was left of his home.
Oh,
Oh,
completely intact. His brother was so scared and so mad at the same time. They said that he grabbed it from the firefighters and put his boot through it. Right? So that's what kicked it off, with the public knowing about it.
no.
So I'm going to give you a few of the things that happened. So September 1985, Dora Brand of Mitcham, Surrey, reported that her home mysteriously burned to the ground 6 months after buying the painting. It was the only one remaining out of her very large collection of art. In the same month, Sandra Krask of Kilbourne said that she, her sister, her mother, and her friend had all suffered mysterious fires after they had each bought copies for their homes. October 21st, 1985, the Perillo Pizza Palace in Great Yarmouth, Norfolk, was gutted by fire, although its prominently displayed Crying Boy remained in perfect condition. October 24th, the Godford family in Herringthorpe, South Yorkshire, lost their home to an unexplained fire. Their Crying Boy was displayed in their living room and was untouched, although 2 paintings on either side were completely destroyed. October 25th, 2 Crying Boys in the Amos family house in Heswall, Merseyside, were found intact after a gas explosion blew apart their home. Right? It's insane. November 1985, Mrs. Woodward of Forest Hill, London, out of fear of her house catching on fire because of hers, uh, she destroyed her copy to save herself, but promptly the next day lost her son, her daughter, her husband, and her mother in separate fire incidents.
good grief.
Mm-hmm. In November 1985, a woman from Leeds destroyed her copy and soon after lost 3 sons and her husband's in her husband in a mysterious fire. 12th of November, Malcolm Vaughan of Churchdown, Gloucestershire, helped destroy his neighbor's copy and then went home to find his house ablaze in an unexplained fire.
That
In
is nuts.
December, a 67-year-old William Armitage was burnt to death in an unexplained house fire in Avon, and his charred body was discovered lying on the floor beside a crying boy painting. It was literally laying right beside him, and he was so charred he was unrecognizable. But the painting was fine.
That's
I have
crazy.
no idea how that
Now,
happens.
the
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist in my brain says, what if somebody was burning these places down and then placing a crying boy? But
I
then there's stuff that says, no, that's not possible.
Mhm.
These fires were happening all over the UK, some of them on the same day. So, unless there was a group of people pre-planning this and setting blazes on the same days in separate, places.
Well, I don't think there was
Um,
probably a crying boy cult, but it surprises me that they were popular at all because
yeah,
I'm
they are weird.
They are.
So,
And this is just one sample. There's a ton of
yeah, there's
different
a
ones
ton
out
of 'em.
there.
Yeah. So the fireman who found that gentleman charred beyond recognition with that crying boy, he gave a quote. I have a quote from him because he was talking to the news right after this happened. He said, and I quote, "I've never believed in the jinx up until now, but when you actually come across a picture in a gutted room and it's literally the only thing that hasn't been touched, it is most odd."
That is
So,
freaky.
yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty odd.
Yeah. I did think it was funny. So, the fire chief of the area, like, it's kinda different from here, like, I think there's a fire chief for each little department, but there's also, like, a head fire chief that's kind
Mhm.
of in charge of all the investigations and things
So
like
it kind of
that.
be like if it was our county, it'd be like Caney, Coffeyville, Independence has a fire chief, and then there's a Montgomery County
Yeah, kinda like that.
Like a
overall.
fire
Yeah.
marshal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this dude was in charge of investigating all these, and he poo-pooed it his whole life. Up until his death, he was like, "No, the this never happened. It's ridiculous," and blah 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 blah. But when he retired from the force, he was gifted a crying boy painting,
Oh, that's just
and he
mean.
he refused it though. He
I don't
refused to
blame
take it home
You
you.
with him.
know,
That's crazy.
even
Is
if
that
you
somebody
don't
that didn't like
believe in a
you?
curse, there is
I don't
no
know.
use. Um, there's no use taking the chance.
No, not at all.
I
Yeah.
mean,
That's
better
nuts.
safe than sorry, whether you believe in it or not.
So, moving on a little bit here, we need to go back and talk about the artist just a little bit because a lot of people think that the curse actually started with what the artist was up to when he was painting these, right? So the artist Bruno Amadio, I'm not gonna go by his pen name. We're gonna go by his real name. Uh, like I said, he painted over 60 versions of this Crying Boy collection, and the collection, they were all featured little boys. He had his favorites, but there was a lot of different little boys that were crying and sad and suffering looking. And this actually brought about speculations of abuse by the artist on his models. They were
Wow.
assuming that he was taking joy
They
in
thought he was
getting
a
them
pedo.
upset. Yeah. Where did he find all these boys? Why are they all crying and so upset? How dare he? Because you'd think that to get them up, you would have to get them upset to get them prepped for your picture. So there was that. Um, and the story behind the boy you're actually looking at right now, this one was his uh, most popular little boy. The story behind him supposedly is that this boy was a model he found. He was a little street urchin that he found on the streets of Madrid. He was visiting Madrid and found this little boy kind of all alone. It was in the 1960s. The boy's name was Don Bonillo. He
Oh,
was
so
a
they know his
mute.
name.
They did.
Oh.
He was mute and he was an orphan. And he just looked terrible. The artist said he just looked horrible, and it caught his eye, just how sad this little boy looked and the fact that he wouldn't speak. And he actually started painting him right there on the street. He had like his little street stuff and was sketching him out. And a local priest stopped him and warned him away from this little boy, had told him this little boy was an orphan and he was mute because he had witnessed his parents' death in a horrible fire. And no one would take him in because wherever he went, fires happened.
Oh, man.
And they didn't know the origin of that, whether the little boy caused the fires. Perhaps he set the fire that his parents died in, or if the parents simply did die in a fire, but the little boy kind of took this unluckiness along with him. Amadio didn't care, and he actually adopted him, kind of. He didn't really adopt him, but he took him home with him, took over the role of his parent, and he used him as one of the main models for all of these paintings. Which apparently was a bad idea because they said that's where this curse came from. All these paintings of him in this sad state carried in all of these prints of this painting. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I've heard stories of Crying Boy for years, but I never heard that origin story. That's interesting.
Yeah.
At
He
least he didn't leave
actually
him on the street.
he didn't die. He died in 1976, but what happened is that so the artist was alive when some of these fires and things were happening. And Amadio actually ended up kicking him out because the people nearby had nicknamed this guy Diablo because fires would pop up around him.
Yeah.
And one day Amadio's entire studio and all of his belongings burn up in a fire. And he blamed the kid and was like, "Get the heck out." So the kid was back on his own. And oddly enough, like I said, he died in 1976 in a car fire just outside of Barcelona.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrible. Oh my gosh.
It is terrible. So maybe that's the origin for the curse, if anything, if this is real. I will say, so there were like some investigations done on the prints themselves. And of course, the scientists had the reasons why none of them ever even burned. And it's because they said the pressed board that they were made out of didn't burn easily, and that they were lacquered in fireproof lacquer.
All of them.
And I know
Fireproof lacquer?
Pam's an artist. Have you ever heard of fireproof lacquer?
Nope.
Especially
Ever.
out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
No. That
No.
stuff's flammable.
No.
Yeah, no.
But that's scientists said that's the reason behind why the paintings wouldn't burn.
Well, because
So.
most scientists don't want to have
even
anything
Enzo,
to
he's
do-
like, what? Yeah, that's a lame-o excuse. Lame.
Yeah.
Yeah, most scientists don't want to have anything to do with anything that might be not science.
Crazy.
All right. So moving on from the Crying Boy fires, I'm going to do another piece of art, but we can't show this. So this painting, it's very famous. What is Enzo asking? Did the curse continue with the paintings after the child's death? Yeah, it really picked up in the 80s is when the Sun started reporting it. That's really when it hit big. So, yeah. I'm going to move on to a painting called The Hands That Resist Him. It's one of the most famous cursed haunted paintings in the world. And unfortunately, we can't show it to you on here. I actually ended up on the artist's page. He's very much still alive. And he's actually still painting some of these, a series off of this painting that we're going to talk about. He is very strict you have to have written consent from him to show a photo of his painting on any type of social media. And I didn't have the time to go and rast around for that. So if you go and look up The Hands That Resist Him, you don't even need the artist name. You will find it everywhere. And if you're at home right now and you're capable of it, I would suggest going and looking it up because it's one of the weirdest things you'll ever see. And it'll really give you an idea of what we're looking at here. So, The Hands That Resist Him, it's a painting by Bill Stoneham. He painted it in 1972. Um, he was actually being paid to do a series of paintings, and he had to do something like put it out every 2 weeks or something like that. And this is one of those paintings. It was put on display at a gallery in Beverly Hills, California. Um, it was reviewed by an art critic named Henry Seldes, and then it was purchased by the famous Godfather actor John Marley. John Marley's the dude that woke up beside the horse head in his bed. For all you Godfather fans out there, that dude bought it. But soon after he bought it, the art critic Henry Seldes died. Unfortunately. Then the gallery owner who sold him the painting died. And then John Marley himself died. And unfortunately, we lose the painting here for a short while. It actually ends up outside of an old empty brewery in an alleyway, which is where we pick it back up again. It was found by a California couple in 2000. They were like, wow, why would somebody chuck a painting out like this? And they scooped it up and they took it home and hung it in their children's room. And now if you're viewing this right now, you'll know why this was a creepy,
I
weird
looked at
idea.
those pictures. I would not let a child near
No.
them. They're
Yeah.
disturbing.
So before I go
just-
on, I'm going to give you.
I just posted a banner up of the website that has the entire series on it
Yeah.
of the photos.
For those of you who are listening on your podcast listener, or you're not capable of going and looking at it right now, I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. So it's a tall painting. It has a figure of a young boy in the front of it. And beside him is a full-sized doll. It's the same size as he is. And the doll looks like it's holding a gun, but if you look closer, it's actually like a metal tube with some wires hanging out of it. Enzo doesn't want a cursed picture on his computer.
It's bizarre.
Although
Yeah.
it's probably
So-
not the worst thing on my computer.
Behind the two figures of the little boy and the doll is a glass window or set of doors. And behind that are pressed a whole bunch of hands pressed up against the glass. This painter, he doesn't paint super realistically, but portions of it are painted super realistically, but the rest of it has more of a comic book feel, like a comic book painting to it. So you have this weird juxtaposition happening, and the very vacant eyes of the boy, and the fact that the doll doesn't have any eyes.
Yeah, it's freaky.
The whole thing is just very surreal. So I'm just implanting that in your head. So as we go on, you can kind of have that in your head. So the couple who hung this thing in their house started claiming very odd occurrences happening in and around the painting. They claimed that their daughter would stay up all night long because the painting kept her up. She would watch the doll and the boy fight over the gun. They would move within the painting. She said several times the boy reached outside of the painting or would step out of the painting into the room. They said the doll would sometimes be turned towards you with the gun pointing at you. And they said that the hands would slightly move back behind the window that they were painted behind. At one point, it got so bad, and the daughter was so scared that the father set up motion detectors in the house pointed towards the painting, and those started going off. So he started getting a video camera, and he was getting motion happening within the painting. You could see little things just kind of shifting where they shouldn't be. Right?
I'm
So
gonna
why
nope right out of that.
why
Right.
leave it up? But they did. And eventually they said that the characters actually changed position completely. The boy would be on the wrong side and the doll would be on the other, or the boy would be behind the glass with the hands. At this point, they finally apparently had enough and decided to sell this thing on eBay. And it came with this huge disclaimer. Now, of course, you can't see that anymore, but if you go and you look online for that original eBay listing, a lot of people did screenshots and stuff of it, and you can see this long disclaimer of everything that had happened with this picture, and that basically, if you were to buy it, you're taking all this on, and that's on you. Was basically the disclaimer. Now, this is where this painting got famous. So it became the famous cursed and haunted eBay painting. It had over 30,000 views while it was up. And people started reporting that when they went to go look at the listing, that they were getting ill, that they were getting upset, that they were vomiting. It did sell, and it sold to a private buyer in Michigan whose name is still unknown, but has reported that they don't actually display it. It's kept locked up in a storage room, and they refuse to sell it. So it hasn't been in the public since 2000. But it has taken on this legend. So the picture itself, the artist claims that the boy was modeled after a picture of himself in his youth. The hands behind the glass represent other lives, and the glass is a barrier between two worlds, and the doll that is with him is his guide. So that is still creepy as all get out.
So is this guy related to, I don't know, Aleister
He's
Crowley or something? I don't.
Right?
he's a creepy dude. So yeah. Interesting. So little side note here to this, because that's the premise of the entire curse. And like I said, it's been in storage, so no more new news from it. But when I was doing the research for this, I found a blog by a gentleman, an author named Darren Kyle O'Neill. In 2016, he published a dramatized account of the story of the painting. Like, he took all the information and kind of made like a dramatic little mini novel out of the story of it. He went on vacation for a month after he put the book out for sale. And when he came back from his month-long vacation, he found everything in his home was covered in green mold.
Oh.
He had a faulty air conditioner he left running. And he said everything. He said it was in the pockets of his coats in his closet. It covered every surface, this horrible green mold.
Oh.
And he said he had a pile of documents printed out beside his printer, all covered in this mold, except for one. And it was the printout of the painting that he had done and left there.
Ooh, no.
Yeah.
Nope.
He said it wasn't discolored. It was bright white, like he had just printed it, and everything out in his house was a sea of green.
Oh my goodness. That's terrible.
Yep. I'm
I
noping
don't
right
like
out
that.
of that.
Yeah.
Y'all, you need to definitely go look at this painting because it's
I'm not looking at
creepy
it
as all
again.
get
It
out.
was disturbing.
Yeah, it is disturbing. That'll be a big old nope, friendzo.
Yeah. So that being said, we still have a lot more to go. So do we want to do
We
a part
do.
2? Because we're
We're gonna
coming
have
down
We're
here
going to need
to
a part 2. We're
end.
only halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
We're
still
gonna
have
have
to
to.
play the notebook game.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes. That's what I was saying. We need to do a couple little rounds in the notebook game, and we will do a part 2 because we have a whole lot more interesting things to talk
And if
about.
there's any that you guys can think of that you would like us to do a little research on and bring to you, let us know. We'll be happy
Oh,
to do
yeah.
it.
And we'll bring it here in 2 weeks. like I said, we have a lot more to go. I will say this. So before we leave this topic and go to the notebook game, there is a huge difference between a haunted object and a cursed object.
Yes.
There was actually more paintings on my list for tonight, and I got rid of a good portion of them because after I did the research, I realized these were hauntings and not curses, where there was something attached to the piece. The monkey's paw.
We could
do
totally
something
do the
like that.
monkey's paw. Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
We're gonna send it to you, Levi.
All right.
Watch
So
your mail.
the notebook game. For
The
anybody watching who doesn't know what the heck we are talking about.
I'm so
on our
excited.
opening show 2 weeks ago, our buddy Enzo, who's in the chats, I believe, had suggested that we have a look through my notebooks. You can see my nickname right there. I do all my research and it goes all down into these hilarious notebooks. So I'll show you one. All my research goes into these. They get tabbed, and there are a horrible amount of different topics that don't seem like they have anything to do with each other in these. And for fun, we did a game where we allowed anybody in the chats or in the group to pick one of the 5 notebooks. I grabbed a different 5. Well, a couple of them might be the same, but there's 5 notebooks in front of me. And all you have to do is tell me which notebook, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and pick a page number. And I will tell you what the heck is on that page. And I am going to tell you now, I am not responsible for what we might pull up.
My inner voice is telling me 318.
Ooh.
318.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the voice in my head says 318.
I don't know if I have one that goes all the way to 318.
No.
But notebook 3,
Notebook 3,
page 18.
page 18.
Oh. Okay. Page 18.
It's going to be something really disturbing.
It might be.
Or something totally hilarious, one or the other. We're all like,
right. So, we're on the Falkirk Triangle in Scotland, in Stirling, Fife, and Edinburgh. Underneath the anomalies that happened in it, UFOs, lights, and aliens. Within the Falkirk Triangle in Scotland, nearly 300 sightings a year are reported. In 1992, there were unidentified lights over Bonny Bridge. A blue light UFO landed. Many UFOs were spotted in one night in November. In 2012, slides were found showing aliens. In 1989, a red object flew over a fire engine. In 1992, a incident on A70 Road with UFO and missing time. Near Gore Bridge, luminous floating green eye. Ew. Meeting place for aliens. Lost livestock, strange lights, alien abductions, sightings of greys. In West Lothian on the same night, a man was assaulted by a UFO. White lights, orange lights, and red lights covered the craft.
Interesting. We've got a few in chat, so I'm going to go down them in order.
All right. So what do you got? Enzo wants notebook 5, page 33. I'm going. You guys can totally chit chat while I'm looking for the page. It takes me just a second.
I mean, the amazing amount of stuff that Jess researches. This should be.
We've got years of material.
Yeah, we're never going to run out. And she keeps making more.
Yes, constantly. It's good stuff, though.
I'm up there. Oh, here we go. Mark knows this one. So this is from a show we did back in Christmas for the What If Tomorrow podcast. We did Christmas Monsters. And this page is on the Yule lads from Iceland, the Sons of Gryla. each named after their own brand of mischievousness. They were like the crazy,
Spoon
like
licker.
Snow White and the
Lord.
Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
There was Stubby, who steals pans to eat the bits stuck onto them. The sausage swiper, who hides in the rafters and steals meat. The sheep Cody Clod, who harasses sheep and drinks their milk. The Gullygawk, who steals foam from buckets of cow's milk. The spoon licker, who licks spoons. I think they could have gotten a crazier name than that. The bull
That was
licker,
kind
the
of
door
on point.
slammer. Yeah. The sky gobbler, who eats all the yogurt. Window peeper, you know what he does. The door sniffer, who steals baked goods. The meat hook, who steals meats and loaves of smoked ham. The candle beggar, who steals candles. And the pot licker. And they'll leave rotten potatoes in bad children's shoes, or just kill
Ew.
them.
Oh, yeah,
Or
one or the
just.
other. How
So there's
funny.
that. What do we got next?
George
Nope,
Noble.
3,
page
7.
7.
Okay.
Hi, George. It's good to see you on here.
1,
Yeah.
2, 3. Page 7. Ooh, right at the beginning. This should be interesting. What did I start this book out with? Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Ah. So this is a write-up on the Estes method and how Connor Randall came up with it.
Nice.
So those of you who don't know what the heck it is we're talking about, Connor Randall is a gentleman who actually works with the Hellier group that Pam was talking about earlier. He originally started out at the Stanley Hotel. He was in charge of like the haunted tours and stuff like that. And he and his team were the ones that came up with the Estes method that everybody sees on the popular ghost hunting shows now, where they take a ghost box or an SB7 and they put headphones onto a listener so only they can hear it, sound canceling so they can't hear questions being asked. They're blindfolded, and then people sit there and ask questions and they simply say whatever it is they're hearing. So you're getting a very pure account of what is coming out of that box, rather than a whole bunch of people thinking they've heard one thing and then they kind of all agree with whatever sounds the best. You're hearing the purest version of whatever is coming out of that ghost box. It really works. Our team has had a lot of great experiences doing it, and some
We've had
scary
some weird
experiences.
stuff
Yeah.
happen while doing it.
Really strange things happen too. For sure.
That was a
Do
good
we
one,
have
George.
anything else?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yes, we have a couple more.
Okay.
Levi has
No.
one.
Levi, notebook 2, page 47. Ooh, I'm gonna skip through this one a little bit. So the great thing is that these have the little folders in between, and I know that there's 25 pages in between
that makes
each
it
one,
easier.
so I can skip a little bit.
I do. While you get there, talking about the Estes method, you guys, that is one of the coolest tools that we use, and we've got some really interesting things off of it.
Yeah, we really have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a listing of crop circles in Missouri.
Oh, yay!
Oh,
Right?
nice.
So we had they had one in Osceola, Missouri on June 21st, 1990, one in Lamonte in 1952, Springfield, Sedalia, Houston, Union, Jenkins, Odessa, Bates City, Craig, Belgrade, Pittsburgh, Springfield, Reed Springs, Defiance, Lewisburg, Sedalia, and St. Joseph, excuse me. The most interesting one of this, just to give you a little idea of what we were going at here. So in St. Joseph, there was multiple circles that happened in the same day. And one of them is very famous because it grew over the course of 3 days. It started out as a simple spiral. And as the researchers came and went throughout the next few days, every time they came back, it was a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger. And when it was finished on those 3 days, it was one huge spiral with 5 outlier spirals perfectly distanced from it. And another interesting point on those, wherever the men had stepped in the field outside of that circle, when new circles were formed where their feet had been, the grass where their feet had been didn't get touched. So you could see their footprints.
Oh, that's wild.
Nice.
So there you go.
Interesting.
All right.
All
Okay,
right.
before we go on, Enzo did ask, how old is notebook number 1?
Well, they're not in any order of age, right? So, I couldn't tell you my oldest. What do we got? Notebook 1, page 19.
Mhm.
Okay.
She's been keeping them probably before we've been a group, so before 2012. So they're
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Notebooks is a really good nickname for her, really.
Isn't it? It's perfect.
Okay. So, Notebook 1, page 19 is odd changes that happened in 2012. Right? So this all goes back to just to give you a little overview. 2012 for us was a strange year. It's the year that Bordertown Paranormal started. It's also the year that they kicked on the collider and they found the hydron. It's also, or not the hydron, they found the God particle. It's also the year that a lot of crazy started happening. We had a lot of Mandela effect and a lot of other things. And one of the things that I found when researching oddities in 2012 was companies' logos all changing across the board. And I wrote up a little list here of some of the more pertinent ones, and I'll just read them out to you so you guys know how weird 2012 was. So company logos that changed: Domino's Pizza, JCPenney's, Twitter, DC Comics, Microsoft, Wendy's, Universal, Arby's, Quaker Oats, Weight Watchers, USA Today, Stanford University, the University of California, the American Red Cross, Lifetime, Jaguar, eBay, Avis, Comcast, and Miller Genuine Draft. And there's
Wow.
more.
That's cool.
Yeah, like there was this weird general shift in 2012 that happened. A lot more to it than that, of course, but that's what's on that page.
2012 is also the year the Mayan calendar ended and a new cycle began too. So it all kind of played together. So that was the last one we had in chat. Do we want to do one more or do we want to wrap it up?
We can do one more if you want.
We can do one more.
Do
two. I don't care.
Do notebook 4, page 4.
Okay. Notebook 4, page 4.
Paragraph
get this
4.
one closed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 4.
I'm excited.
It's like a treasure hunt.
It is.
So this is on crop circles too.
Ooh,
okay.
We have a theme.
This page is on ghost formations. So what a ghost formation is, it's actually where a crop circle has been before, but is no longer. A lot of crop circles will leave a mark behind in some fashion. Either it'll be a spot where nothing grows well anymore for a long time, or that stuff grows exceptionally well afterwards, right? And there's variations on it. There's ones that are called snow ghosts.
I've seen those.
And I remember talking about this one. I talked about this one. I was on with Big Willie, and he got so excited about ghost prints because he was just like, "There's haunted crop circles," and I was like, "That's not what that means." But that's cute. Anywho, so a snow print happens where these circles were. So it's a strange oddity they've never figured out. When snow or ice falls on these areas where these used to be, the snow will either melt off super fast right there in that area, or the snow will stay for a super long time. Like well after the temperature has gone far above where it should have melted, there'll be a perfect layer of snow sitting right there where that crop circle used to be.
So there's like a chemical change in the makeup of the soil itself.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty
And
cool.
just so you know, that's not on this page, but there are snow circles too. For those of you listening, crop circles are so amazing. They actually happen just in snow. They don't even hit the dirt, and the snow will actually be gone from within that circle, as if somebody scooped it up and then moved it away where you couldn't see it anymore.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Crop circles are I know they have a bad rap sometimes, but they are exceptionally interesting when you
Mhm.
realize there's so much more to them.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
will eventually do a show on crop circles.
Oh,
Absolutely.
good. Yeah.
So, yeah, we will.
Cool.
So there you go. There's the end of the notebook game for the night.
Yay!
Yay!
How fun.
Happy Valentine's Day to y'all.
Yeah,
I can't wait for part 2 because there are a lot of good things
Yeah.
Yeah.
on the
have a lot
outline
coming
for
up.
part 2.
Yeah. And that'll be the 28th, I believe. Is it the 28th?
Yeah,
That'll be
28th
the
at
next one?
7. Yep.
Next Wednesday. All
I
right.
am
So we're
in
ready.
like
Are we ready to
Slim.
close out?
We are.
All right.
Mhm.
So I'm going to close this out tonight. Thanks for everybody for hanging out with us on the chats and on the lives and all of that. A big thank you to Mark for coming on with us tonight. You're probably
Yay.
going to see a lot. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and find us on social media. You can find a listing of our show notes, resources, and references on our website, www.bordertownparanormal.com. Under the Bordertown Strange button at the top of the page, you'll find it there. Catch the show live every other Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central. Join us in 2 weeks for an all-new episode. Keep it strange, and remember, it's all connected. Good night.
Yes. Good night,
Good night, folks.
everybody.